This is Deep Down, and I'm your host, Jordan Hunt. This season I'm going to be having conversations with like-minded friends and colleagues, musicians, artists, writers, dancers and other creative folk, interspersed with some solo episodes where I delve deeper into life as a self-releasing musician and artist. I hope you'll join me and that you enjoy this second season of Deep Down. Hello and welcome to Deep Down. Today and this week and this month, it's only the beginning of March, but let's include February in that, I've been thinking about burnout. And I'm not sure if I am burned out, but I think the fact that I'm thinking about it is possibly a sign that I'm in the zone. I have this line from an Olivia Chaney song going round and round in my head, which is funny because the musical lyric video is an image of a carousel going round and round and round. Bit of an earworm. Can I get off this ride? It's from her song Galop, and apparently it's a line from a nursery rhyme that she used as a lyric in the song that her mum used to sing to her before bedtime. It's very poignant because my partner Chris, the videographer for these podcasts, actually made a really beautiful lyric video for Olivia's song, which you can watch on YouTube. And it's this really pretty home video recording of Olivia and her children on a carousel ride with this very beautiful and naive setting. There's such a heavy sentiment loaded with, can I get off this ride? Can someone make it stop, please? It's all getting a bit too much. I think that's the power of Olivia's lyrics and the way that she manages to place existing lyrics, especially nursery rhyme lyrics, in her own creations. Everything is more weighted. For whatever reason, that line really has stuck with me, and it's really true that we see what we want to see, or what we're meant to see, when we're ready to see it. You should go and listen to the song. It's called Galop. It's on her latest album, Circus of Desire. And I'm playing violin at the end in a really beautiful instrumental outro that's sort of effectively attached to what's a piano song. I'm playing with Raki Singh, another fantastic violinist from the Manchester Collective. And it's string arrangements by Nico Mooley. And it's very beautiful, if I do say so myself. And so recently I've been thinking about my projects in terms of being finite or infinite, like this endless merry-go-round. You could say that my musical career is conceptually infinite until I'm no longer here. Hopefully, perhaps my discography might be infinite until the end of civilization as we know it. And you could say that theoretically this podcast, or the idea behind the podcast, was kind of infinite, that it would only stop when I chose to bring it to an end, but that in theory it could just keep going as a vessel to share my ideas and thoughts with you all. It comes from a desire to share my emotional journey in order that it might be helpful for other people. And I get to make these really nice videos with my partner, who's a fantastic, really sensitive videographer who makes such witty edits and has such a really beautiful visual language that he creates for each of these episodes if you're watching them on YouTube or Spotify. If you're listening on another platform, then maybe check out the video versions. On the flip side, something like my recent commission for ENB Youth Company was very finite. It had a 3-week deadline and a very quick turnaround, and the performances are scheduled. And once I'd handed in the track, then effectively my job was done. It's always very satisfying to have closed a loop like that. There are so many unclosed loops in my life. Records that are almost finished, that haven't been shared with the world. Even ideas for projects from 10, 15, 20 years ago that just never quite came to fruition. At some point I imagine I should probably let them go in order to be free of the weight of them. It's a bit like carrying around some luggage. But yeah, all of these unclosed loops. And I think I had this vision of composing until my dying breaths. I mean, this was very much a teenage dream. At that point, I'd never even had a composition lesson, so it wasn't really rooted in reality. I'm not sure I ever really expected that I would make a living as a composer or be paid as a composer professionally. But that's been the case, and I'm glad to say that my life is a little more varied these days, as I still perform and teach and do lots of other fun things. But I definitely leaned into this trope that an artist's life is for the duration of their life. There is no end point other than their timely passing, and that theoretically there is no final deadline, no final goal. I think I only know of one anomaly to this idea, the Finnish composer Jean Sibelius, who apparently retired 30 years before he passed away and gave us some fantastic work in that time. His last symphony, his 7th symphony, is my favourite of his bunch of symphonies. And it feels like he knew that was going to be his final one, and so he really put everything into it. And it's so poignant, the final few chords. It's as though he's saying, "The end." Putting a big full stop at the end of his composing career to then go and live his life, I expect. I don't know enough about his personal life. I'm sure it was very interesting. When I was younger, I didn't really understand this concept of retiring from something that you love so much like that. Though now I age, I definitely can see the appeal and can see the benefits of choosing an easy life over working every day. But I've obviously got some rather hard-working models in mind. I remember when I was studying for my master's, one of my favourite composers at the time was Elliott Carter, an American composer from the 20th century. Effectively, his career spanned the entirety of the 20th century and into the 21st. And he was a phenomenal composer, and he kept working right up until his last days, when he was 103 apparently, just shy of his 104th birthday. He also didn't really break out into the musical world until he was in his 40s, so that definitely gives me hope. It's still early days yet. But it's such a beautiful idea to just keep finding reasons to be creative. I imagine it's the creativity that keeps you going for so long, for so many years, until the point where you choose to stop. When I started this podcast, for example, it wasn't actually supposed to be seasonal. I didn't really have a plan either way. All I knew when I was conceiving it was that I wanted to make sure I had at least 30 ideas for episodes in the bag before I started. Because I didn't ever want to be in the position where I was caught out. And as it turned out, the ideas for the podcast was not the issue. As I started creating, I realised that this creativity was just producing more creativity, and I was definitely not lacking ideas for things I wanted to talk about in terms of aspects of a musician's life, behind the scenes, or what goes on deep down between writing periods, or the kind of stuff that we don't really project when we're on social media, the stuff that's not just the very classic achievements. If you've heard this podcast before, you'll be aware that I definitely lean into the human side of being an artist. I'm glad that I still have this platform to express in that way that many people don't. A nice frame for someone who's introvert like me to be able to put my ideas and thoughts in order and share them with the world in my own pace and in my own way, in a way that I can only hope that I've been understood. In the end, I managed to record and release 20 episodes in early 2024, up until about May, I think. At which point, life got quite a bit busier. I was involved in the Eurovision Song Contest and I had my LSO commission at the Barbican in June and some performances and gigs with Olivia Chaney. And on top of teaching, it seemed reasonable to take a well-deserved break. And by the time I recorded that 20th episode, or 21st episode, I still had at least 20 or 30 ideas for future episodes still in my little filing cabinet of ideas. I knew at some point I'd be able to pick up the baton once again and get rolling. It's funny, my composition teacher David Horn used to tell me the best trick to always composing was to stop when you were mid-flow. So stop just before you'd run out of ideas, so that when you came to sit down again at your desk, you could just pick up where you left off. You were just finishing the idea that you had the day before, or whatever it was. It's very wise, but for someone like me who struggles to finish things or close those loops, it's dangerous territory to not actually finish something, because otherwise they just lie on your hard drive unfinished, and then you forget they were ever there. I guess that's the beauty of having the physical score on your desk in front of you, that you can see it, and it's staring you in the face saying, finish me. And so on one hand, actually, productivity seems to beget productivity. And I realized I was creating this almost infinite content engine or system of sharing thoughts and ideas, which in itself as an idea is exciting, but at the same time I'm only human, and it's also quite an overwhelmingly exhausting concept. So I'm endlessly trying to figure out ways to automate or systematize things so that I can share what's important without then also having to waste energy doing the annoying administrative stuff. I also sort of hate that word content, because I don't necessarily think of myself as a content creator, though that may be what the HMRC thinks of me as. I definitely don't want to just be making for the sake of making. I'm very proud of the fact that I managed to release at least one podcast episode each week in that first season, on top of my regular full-time commitments as a teacher and a self-releasing artist who wanted and intended to release music, and as a general musical freelancer. And as this is my second season, I was really acutely aware of wanting to make sure I could continue what I'd started and had committed to. And now I'm juggling the reality of a weekly release alongside teaching. It's becoming apparent that it's not so realistic. And one of the great driving factors behind this project is that it's fun. I have a real compulsion to share. I love chatting with my friends, and I love chatting with my pupils when it's appropriate to share my life experiences. I love chatting to anyone who will listen, basically. So today, as I'm filming, it's actually probably the first day off in many weeks that I've not been teaching today, as one of my lessons was cancelled. And my tactic is usually to make myself available for bookings on weekday mornings and evenings, and weekends from the morning. And that normally gives me at least the middle of the day to get on with some other stuff. But it's also a 7-day week. The teaching can be very energizing, and it's almost self-sustaining if the hours are within a reasonable limit. But this past couple of weeks have been pretty full on. And then with the added ambition to create and release a new podcast episode every week, it's suddenly become quite a lot. And my body is sending me signals that maybe I need to have a nap, or maybe I need to rest, or maybe I need to exercise. Either way, I need to do something, and all of those things take time, time away from working. I'm definitely learning to listen to my body's signals as I age. And sometimes my mind or my brain is a bit slow on the uptake when it comes to putting all of these thoughts in order and then coming to a conclusion that you might act upon. So I'm here listening to my body and realizing that burnout is real. I spent the morning in the garden, which is effectively a roof terrace, but it's very nice to have outdoor space, especially in London, and it's been rather neglected over the winter months. I think I had an aversion to opening the big double doors of the kitchen for fear of letting the cold in or letting the heat out. That's probably kept me away from the garden for the most part, but also I just haven't really had the time, or rather I haven't chosen to make the time. And so as I knew I'd planned to record an episode today, Chris had the great idea of actually capturing me in the garden, which is a bit of performative gardening, I suppose. But I definitely jumped at the chance to do some weeding and cutting back and mulching and attempting at reseeding and so on, and some more structural stuff, moving pots around and moving the compost piles around. And the time flew by, and I think then I realised I needed that time in the garden more than I knew. And this performative gardening in front of a camera wasn't really performative gardening, it was real gardening, you'll be able to see. And I was definitely lost in the task, and it was a really mindful experience. And it afforded me time to think about my body and my mind and my mental health, and about the rather unrealistic expectations and ambitions some of us place upon ourselves, most of us place upon ourselves, I'm sure, that's fueled by positivity and hope, but maybe it's not connected to real-time energy expenditure. And so those couple of hours in the garden, I think, helped me to connect with reality on one level, and made me realise that this podcast doesn't need to be a weekly podcast. It can be an ad hoc podcast. I still like the idea of committing to releasing on Tuesdays, but rather than releasing every single Tuesday, maybe I'm going to aim to release every other Tuesday. And then if I release weekly, then it's a bonus for everyone. For example, my friend, the writer, Lauren J. Joseph, sends out a really nice Substack email, some of their writing, every 2 weeks to their collection of subscribers. And I really always look forward to that in my inbox, to reading that. And it seems like quite a realistic commitment that doesn't pull them away from writing time for their long-term projects, their second novel, for example. I doubt that would have happened had they also been having to churn out a weekly newsletter instead. And I'm definitely inspired by Cal Newport's idea of slow productivity in order to avoid burnout. To do fewer things, to do them exclusively, not to replace quality with quantity. And I really don't want to stop this podcast. I have a compulsion to keep sharing, but for the immediate future, at least, I think I'm going to lower the stakes in order to make my life a little more pleasant and human, and commit to releasing at least every other week rather than holding myself hostage to a weekly release. If you've followed me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and subscribed to my YouTube channel, you'll still get little reminders or notifications of a new treat awaiting your ears and eyes if you watch the video. And just know that it always comes from a place of love and good intentions and hopefully deep quality. And you can rest assured that I'm taking my pace of life at a more human speed. I think deep down, I don't want to get off the ride. Life is far too fun and energizing and precious to not enjoy every moment of it. But I do want to make sure that I'm finding a bit more balance between work and life. And as I've said before, this is all a labour of love, and it will continue to be so. But part of that labour is to love myself as well, and make sure that I'm well rested in order to gather my thoughts in a coherent fashion for it to be worthy of your ears. So I hope you take some time for yourself today and this week and this month, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Don't forget to subscribe, follow and review this podcast, and if you like it, share it with your friends or on social media. You can find me on social platforms at Deep Down with Jordan Hunt and at Jordan Hunt Music. Deep Down uses bits of my music from my song Ocean Floor, and you can listen to my music on all streaming services. I'd love to hear from you via DM or via my website, jordan-hunt.com, if any of these experiences resonated with you, and there you can sign up to the mailing list for announcements and updates. Thank you so much for listening.